Finally, she takes her blouse in her hands and draws it off, her bra falling from her shoulders. And so, Hanako stands in the middle of the room, all but bared, save for her stockings and underwear. This is me. All of me. My eyes are immediately drawn to the scarring on her back. The skin on her right side is of a similar texture to that of her face, but it's also stretched taut and covering a much larger area. The scarring is by far the worst on her shoulder, buttock and thigh. Just as my heart attack redefined my life, this is the event that redefined Hanako's. If I'd seen this when I first met her, I'd have been shocked, not only at the sight, but also the idea that something like this was survivable. But after having had time to get used to the idea, and after seeing the scars on her face, hands and collar, my reaction is more measured. My reaction right now is not due to her scarring, but to her body. The fire happened when I was 8 years old. It was night, and we were sleeping when it started. Hanako's voice trembles, the shaking of her blouse giving away the fact that her hands are doing just the same. I curled up into a ball when the fire swept over me. My mother tried to shield me. That's the only reason I lived. Hanako's eyes begin to moisten, her voice cracking under the combined pressure of exposing her to me like this, and reliving those painful memories from so long ago. I want to say something, anything to make her feel better. I can't though. I feel completely useless when faced with a situation like this. She's forcing herself to come so close, yet at times like this, I feel most distant from her. I'm sorry for making you see this. There's no point in denying the obvious. I think what I should say now, and what Hanako wants me to say, is the truth. What I genuinely, honestly believe. It doesn't matter. You're a wonderful person, Hanako. Your body doesn't change that. She looks at me for a long time, her breathing uneven as she tries to remain steady amidst the emotions we're both feeling. It feels less like she's looking at me than she's looking through me. I slowly walk towards her, and gently place my hands on her shoulders as she lets go of her blouse. She gasps a little, not in fright, but in simple startlement. Being so close to her causes my mind to become a jumble of feelings. The scarring on her shoulder, plain to see and leather-like to the touch, conflicts strangely with her otherwise soft skin and silky dark hair. Hanako is a girl with all that entails. She's taller than usual for a woman, but still has curves in all the right places. The nape of her neck, just visible thanks to her hair slung over her shoulder, is alluring. I know that I'm not pretty, like Lily. I just wanted... I wanted you to see me. The real me. I've already seen the real you, though. You didn't need to take off your clothes for that. Her lips are open just a little. She lets out a sharp breath as, without thinking, I breathlessly lean forward and press my lips to hers. The kiss only lasts for a fleeting moment before our faces part, our breathing quick and nervous. The feeling of Hanako's mouth lingers and her eyes remain locked to mine. Trembling a little myself, I remove my tie and begin undoing the buttons of my shirt. Hanako remains standing where she is, looking at the ground in front of her rather than watching me undress. On the one hand, I'm thankful for that. I've always been somewhat self-conscious of my body, but my scarring has made that quite a lot worse. On the other though, this atmosphere feels very strange. My shirt falls to the floor in a heap, as untidy and crumpled as Hanako's blouse and skirt. Hanako's entire body visibly flinches at the sound of the zipper on my trousers being pulled down. My trousers join my shirt on Hanako's floor next to the bed, as do my socks in short measure. I hesitate before taking off my boxers and end up leaving them on. They represent one last hurdle I don't think I can overcome quite yet. Sheer embarrassment stops me, along with not wanting Hanako getting even more worked up. My unease about the situation has also left me needing my own stimulation. Hanako. She gives a nod without so much as glancing at me, and makes her way to the bed as I do. She walks as if her legs were wooden sticks. I'd find it amusing if I weren't doing exactly the same thing. I take the initiative, turning around and sitting on the side of the bed. I look to her face to invite her to take a seat either next to me or in front of me, but end up awkwardly looking down to stop myself from staring at her body. And then, after a couple of seconds, it ends. The sound of Hanako's breathing and my own rings in my ears, almost painfully loud. Hanako holds an arm over her face, her mouth open and gulping in air. As I hold myself over her, suddenly my arms almost give way and my vision distorts, as if someone's grabbed it and pulled sideways. I let myself fall sideways onto the bed beside the panting Hanako, for fear of falling onto her instead. We both lie beside each other, naked and pressed against each other in order to fit on a bed made for a single person. My eyes try to focus on the ceiling, to not much success. Pulling a blanket over us to stave off the cold is all I can do. The only sound in the room is that of our breathing. The sweat that had accumulated on my body feels uncomfortable. We're both physically and emotionally exhausted, and a complete mess all over. Eep. My vision slowly begins to return to normal as I continue to stare at the ceiling. My limbs still feel like jelly. I tried to concentrate on my chest and find its beat irregular and mildly painful. This is a dangerous time. I have to think this through and not panic, lest I make my situation any worse. With a huge effort, I take control of my erratic breathing, forcing myself to make long, deep breaths. I count half a dozen before I start to feel physically calm again, and press my hand to my chest to assure myself. My heart beats back to normal. I'm okay. I turn my face towards Hanako, who's already looking at me. Her expression looks pretty dazed, but underneath that, there's definitely a look of concern. She's realised what happened. I'm okay. Everything's back to normal. I find myself barely able to get the words out between breaths. I don't think sex would tire a normal body out this much, so I have no doubt my condition's at least partially at fault. Why did my body have to do this right now? All thoughts of my heart, though, are pushed aside as I see the wide smile forming on Hanako's face. As always, I smile back without another thought. Hanako's smile has always been infectious in its almost childlike sweetness and earnestness, something that sets her apart from anyone I know. Right now, we don't need words. Everything we want to communicate to each other, we can share just fine without them. My eyes feel heavy as they slowly open, the light from outside making me blink a bit to let them get adjusted. My body feels like lead, and my head feels just as heavy. Waking up to an unfamiliar ceiling is an uncomfortable feeling. It reminds me of the first time I awoke to the dimpled white tile ceiling of the hospital. It's only after spending a few seconds staring up at it that I realise where I am. This is Hanako's dormitory room. I feel as though my heart stopped again as the events of last night rush through my head. Blood rushes to my cheeks, and I shut my eyes once more. There's very little point to getting myself worked up this early though, so I tried to push such things out of my mind for now. I roll my head to the side to see if Hanako's where she was when I drifted off to sleep. All that's there now is an empty space on the bed and the room beyond. I sluggishly sit up and rub my eyes before pinching the bridge of my nose and looking around the room. The only person here is me. I'm still bereft of my clothes, and after a quick scan of the floor for them, I notice that they're neatly folded in the corner of the room. Try as I might, I can't see Hanako's anywhere. The foil packet of the condom's been removed too, presumably put into the bin. With a great yawn, I get myself out of bed and quickly look for some underwear. I grimace a little at the prospect of putting my boxes back on after yesterday's efforts did a job on them, but I don't have much choice. Taking advantage of the fact that I have some time without anyone around, I get myself dressed for the coming school day in short order. And then, I'm alone. Without anything more to busy myself with, my mind becomes focused on the fact that I'm standing in another person's bedroom after we spent the night together, but there's not a single sign of her around. My gut proves to be more helpful than my brain at working out this riddle. With a loud growl, it reminds me that she may well just be getting breakfast. I would have liked to wake up next to her, but maybe it's a good thing that I have a few moments alone. Hanako's room, as always, is quite bleak in appearance. There are precious few decorations, and practically no personal artifacts that aren't hidden away in cupboards and drawers. She's lived here for 3 years, but the room looks as if it's barely been occupied for a single day. I shouldn't overthink this. She might just like living this way, as some do. Having the ability to put such a low stock in physical possessions does have its advantages, but even so, it feels a little disconcerting given her past. She said she viewed herself as having had her life on hold while at the orphanage. She certainly lives as if she still does, but after what happened last night, it's pretty hard to imagine that she still thinks that way. The sound of the door handle cracks through my thoughts and I turn to face it. Sure enough, Hanako comes through and shuts the door behind her. She has what seems to be 2 microwaved instant meals in her hand, so this is a little difficult. Good morning, Hanako. Morning? She gives a little bow before making her way to her desk, setting down both plates. I can now see them to be small satay dishes, their contents steaming, with a fork stuck inside the rice of each. I give thanks to her for bringing them in, and we each take one and get down to eating. She sits on a desk chair while I sit on the side of the bed. I don't like talking while eating, so the silence between us isn't annoying in and of itself. It's the fact that it only exists because we don't quite know what to say to each other that's off-putting. Hanako glances towards me every so often as she eats. I only notice her doing so because I'm doing just the same thing. We're eating together as if we were a couple. We even had sex last night, a first for the both of us. Something feels wrong, though. Maybe that's why we can't say even a word to each other as we finish our plates and leave them in the sink. Maybe that's why we leave Hanako's room without holding hands or making small talk. Maybe that's why it feels as if we're further apart than we've ever been before. We enter the classroom together, neither of us so much as glancing at each other. Just after we do, I realise that this may have been a mistake. Shizune lifts her eyebrows at the sight, her suspicions raised. We reach the centre aisle between the classroom's desks and look to each other. I'm not quite sure what I should say. Does she want me to address her as a girlfriend? I didn't think our relationship was... Oh, that's why this feels so strange. See you? Okay. I awkwardly hold up a hand as we part and take our seats at our respective desks. I can't even look back to her out of embarrassment. I feel like the gulf between Hanako and me is because of me. Shizune begins to make her way towards me, but then Mutao enters the room. I'm thankful for his arrival being so well timed, drawing Shizune and her questioning away to wait for another time. I wouldn't have been able to answer her anyway. I like Hanako, but I've never told her what my feelings for her are. Hanako never said she saw me as anything beyond a friend either, yet despite that, we slept together. The bell to signal the beginning of lunch rings out. Mutao is taken a little off guard, his chemistry lecture being cut off mid-sentence much to his chagrin. For the entirety of the class, his rambling has passed through one ear and out the other as my mind mulls over the question of Hanako. I can't get her out of my mind, and by now I've managed to wind myself up about it. I realise that she never said yes to what we did. She didn't say no, oh dear. She didn't say no either, but would she have been able to? She's extremely submissive at the best of times, and no doubt it took her a gargantuan effort to show me her scarring. I decided to try and at least make conversation with her. That would be better than the monosyllabic communication that's been the most we've managed between each other so far today. I walk to her desk intending to chat, but she awkwardly blushes and looks down even before I've come up to her. I take a breath to speak, but find myself lost for words. What in the world should I say? Hearing approaching footsteps, I turn to see Shizune and Misha already making their way towards us, no doubt with the intent to start asking troublesome things. A couple of other classmates are looking at us and gossiping between themselves as they throw sidelong glances. They must also have noticed Hanako and me coming in together earlier. I open my mouth to reassure Hanako, but she preempts me. I've got to go do something. She gets out of her chair and dashes for the door. A couple of the books and pens that were on her desk are sent falling to the floor in her rush. Not many people seem to care about this event. A few look around to see what all the fuss is about, but go back to what they were previously doing soon after. I'm left despairingly looking at the door that Hanako disappeared out of. The idea of running after her passes through my mind, but I'm fairly sure that Hanako can run faster than I can. And besides, what would I say to her once I caught up anyway? Eventually I simply crouch down and begin picking up the items that had fallen to the ground from her desk. I feel low in every way. Reduced to this, students pass me by on their way out of the room. I feel a tap on my shoulder. I look up to see Shizune and Misha looking at me. Curiosity about the situation written on their faces, mixed with a slightly apologetic look at the idea that they are partially responsible for what just happened. Hichan, if we can help at all. I just shake my head. This isn't a matter for them, and from Shizune's expression and the tone of Misha's voice, I think they know the same thing. Shizune acknowledges my response and gives a solemn bow before making her way out of the room. Misha soon follows out, obediently following her role as Shizune's shadow. I pick myself up, books and pens in hand, and place them inside Hanako's desk. With the classroom now empty, I end up just leaning against her desk and thinking to myself in silence. It feels like there's a complete emotional disconnect between Hanako and me. We haven't known each other for all that long, and despite wanting to start going out with her, I really don't know that much about how Hanako views things. I've been studying as hard as I can for exams, but I still don't feel like I have any real sense of direction behind it. I tried to be friends to Hanako, even if I couldn't tell her my feelings, and all we've done is drive each other apart. I couldn't even write a letter back to the one girl who ever loved me, Iwanako. What should I do? What can I do? I simply don't know the answer to either of those questions. I do know that nobody else can help me with them. Just going back to the way things were would be enough to make me happy, but I know that can never happen. Something changed between us last night. Maybe it changed beforehand and it just came to a head then. I know that there's a wall that Hanako has between me and her. I've been hitting that wall every time I've tried to interact with her on any level. But now I'm beginning to think that I have my own wall between us just as much as she does. She had to practically drag my past out of me, and mine was much less traumatic than hers. I want to say it's because I haven't had long to adjust since my heart attack, but I know full well that that would just be an excuse. The one time I can recall when it really felt like she was opening up to me of her own accord was when we were playing billiards in the city. I was the one who stopped her going any further. I want to show Hanako better. I want to save our friendship, if not begin a real relationship with her. My mind begins to tick as I sit against her desk, thinking to myself in the empty classroom that we've spent so much time in together. I have to talk to Hanako. I pace around in the park, feelings of anxiety rolling over me. Every so often I reach into my pocket to take out my phone, but each and every time I hesitate and end up slipping it back in. If this were any other situation, I wouldn't be cutting class. Unfortunately it isn't, and so I find myself in the town below the school at 2 p.m. Ever since I met Hanako, I've been the one to initiate everything between us, the one that started the conversations, went to her wherever she was, and suggested what we should do. Today, this once, I don't want to be the only one doing that. My hand dives into my pocket once more. This time I quickly navigate to the texting menu before I have a chance to change my mind again. Hanako, if you want to talk, I'll be at the park in town for a while. Fighting a last measure of doubt, I thumb in my message to Hanako and press the button to send it. And now, I wait. My part in this has been fulfilled. What needs to happen now is for Hanako to make the decision. It would be meaningless for me to drag her here. She needs to decide for herself whether she wants to meet me. The apple juice from the vending machine tastes awfully bitter as I swallow it down. My grip on the can has caused it to dent slightly in the middle. I shouldn't be this tense, but it's probably inevitable. Hanako is dear to me. What happened in the last couple of days has put a lot of pressure on both of us. The idea of losing all the progress we've made in coming closer to one another, losing our friendship as a whole, it's deeply unsettling. But even then, I still don't really know how close we are. We may have had sex, but before that, all I knew us to be was friends. Maybe we are more than that, but if so, I never realised it. Maybe that's why I feel so uneasy right now. I don't understand Hanako, despite all the time we've spent together. The minutes are ticking by, and I still have no idea whether she'll show up. Hisao? I pause for a moment, almost not believing that I'm hearing the voice I'm hearing. I drop the can and stand up with a start. Hanako! We look at each other for a few seconds before Hanako becomes too embarrassed to maintain eye contact and begins to nervously fiddle with the roughly cut lock of hair covering the side of her face. When I went to see Hanako in her room by herself after a breakdown, I had no idea what to say. That was fine then. All either of us wanted was each other's presence. Now though, I feel like I need to talk to her directly. I want to break down this wall between us before it forces us apart for good. Hanako, what we did that night, how should I interpret it? Hanako stops playing with her hair and looks at me, her head cast slightly downwards. She looks ashamed, which is probably a good mirror of how I would look now if I wasn't so concerned. I thought you might eventually go away if I was only someone you needed to protect. I thought that if I let you do that, you might see me as someone more than that.